Just some brief housekeeping before we jump in. You can turn your cameras on and you can engage with us in the chat. And just know that this is, as you just saw, this is being recorded. And if you type in the chat or if you come off mute, that will be part of the recording. So we'll be sending a follow-up link as well. And feel free to message me privately if there's anything you'd like to ask. If you want to ask a question anonymously, I'm happy to relay that for you. So you can just direct message me in the chat box. So if you go over to the chat and then you click on my name, then you'll see it has like private, I think, and says it in red. And then that way, that means you're chatting with just me. And you can follow us on social media at Power to Fly, and you can subscribe to all the things, our YouTube channel, our Instagram. I don't think we're on TikTok, but that's, neither am I. So my dear new friend, Helen Sanchez, is here. And she is the founder of the Tanagui Career Consultants. Helen's background includes over 20 years working in recruiting, education, in women and gender studies, as well as African American studies. She is the founder of Tanagui Career Consultants, whose primary focus is to offer services that result in breakthrough resumes and interview mastery for women over 40. So please give a warm welcome to Helen. Hi, Helen. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And as Hunter said, we are excited to be discussing this topic with you and answering your questions.
Yes, it's such an important topic. And I'm so grateful to be getting to talk to you about this. And please do, if you have any questions, folks, as you are listening in, feel free to drop them in the chat. As you can see, I'm a little distracted by my 4-month puppy. I keep looking off to the side. If that's why you're like, why is this person looking over there? It's because of the dog. It's the dog. Okay, so we're going to be talking about ageism and how to overcome that and what we can do with our job applying, with resumes, with the hunt, with maybe once you're in the job. So Helen, maybe before we jump into questions, we have pre-submitted questions that the folks wrote into. Again, folks, if there's anything coming up, drop it in the chat. But Helen, maybe you can talk about some of the common pitfalls that you notice that people have experienced, and just some of the hurdles and maybe any personal stories that have been challenging for you, or things that have been helpful for you in your journey with this topic.
Well, I think the main questions that I normally address and help people with is formatting their resume. And from a simple perspective of, and one of our questions, graduation date. No, not you make it too easy. Unfortunately, when we get experienced and a little older, the burden falls on us to sell ourselves and have an employer overlook that or not be aware of it, or at least not make it too easy for them before they get to see how great we are. So I would say how you format your resume, what you put on it is critical. One of the things that is definitely very, very important for me, and that I talk to clients about all the time, is networking, and how important networking is, and how much I think statistically 70 to 80% of jobs are filled through networking. Jobs that aren't ever posted can be filled through networking. So networking is very important, and a lot of people are overwhelmed with it or afraid of it, or and they shouldn't be, because it's a matter of building a relationship with someone and really recognizing their strengths and offering them yours. So it's not a hello, help me, bye. It's a relationship. And when you look at it that way, I think it becomes more important and better for you. And those two are very important. And the last item that tends to be an enormous challenge for women is their confidence. And when you go in and you sit down and you sit for an interview or on Zoom for an interview, you have to be confident, and you should be confident, because we all bring very important, valuable skills to the table. And some of us don't recognize them. When I recruited years ago, when I recruited a lot of young people, I would say to them, when you take a position, the day that you start that position, get a journal. And you can write your day-to-day routine, but then also write the projects you worked on, the skills that you learned, the achievements, because you'll never remember all of them. And so what's important is when you start on this journey, that you should sit down with a blank piece of paper and you should evaluate what you've actually done. Not just, oh, I worked here, or oh, I worked in finance, or oh, I worked in marketing. No, what did you do? What did you bring to the table? What were your achievements? Did you work on a team? Soft skills today are so important. Were you a team member on a successful team? Did you lead a team? Did you lead a project? What is it? We have these just wonderful, valuable skills that we tend not to appreciate ourselves. And it's so important, so important.
Wow, there's so much in there, Helen. Thank you for that. Well, I'll work backwards from that. So talking about I think that's so wonderful about touching on the achievements of what we tend to forget, right? There's something called the negativity bias that I am deeply familiar with because I have it in myself. And I remember all the things I didn't do right, as opposed to and they outweigh all the things that I did do right, and I think that's so wonderful to like keep this journal of your successes and maybe some of the challenges too, but it really helps us remember all the things we have achieved. So I love that. I think that's such a great tip. And then the confidence, right? You were talking about, I'm going to botch these numbers, so please jump in if you know that, but there's that study, right? That's like men, male presenting folks, for the interview, if they only have they think they know like 60% of it or whatever, they're just like, bam, I got this. Right. And like women generally need to have 100% of feeling. Yeah. Right.
And that's again, one of the questions. And having worked in the recruiting industry, staffing industry for so many years, job descriptions are just so kind of like throw it against the wall and let's see what happens, unfortunately. Right. And so, yeah, absolutely. If you're comfortable that the role that you can handle, then by all means, the worst thing that'll happen is you'll get a no. So, it definitely, and you're absolutely right. Statistically, studies have shown that men will say, oh, I have half that, let me go do it. And women will say, oh, I'm missing 2. No, just go for it. Go for it.
Right.
Yeah. And look at those transferable skills from one industry to another, because they're critical. And again, we tend to not really, it's the imposter syndrome of, I can't do it. Yes, you can do it. Honestly, you can.
Oh, I love this. I'm already getting full of like wisdom and hope. Thank you. It's a warm and fuzzy session. I can already tell. Like our dogs. I'm getting private requests for puppy pics. They'll make a cameo, I promise. So, and now the first thing that you touched on, which then I'm going to use to segue into some of our questions, is resumes, right? So resumes are a really important tool. I also feel as though they are a bit of a hot topic because there's a lot of debates. I have a lot of these conversations of power to fly, do it this way, not that way, cover letter, no cover letter, don't include your past a certain amount of this amount of time. No, you must include everything. How do I do? It's just like this can of worms about resumes. And I see a lot of nodding heads right now about like, yep, this is the chat, right? So let's focus in on with our topic about ageism and overcoming it. So let's look at it from that lens, right? So I feel like there's probably a lot of people on this call with a lot of valuable experience, and we're just trying to figure out how to put it down, how we can get that job, and how we can apply it to the next role, right? Yes. So first question that was pre-submitted, and again, folks, any questions that come up for you, please drop them in the chat and I will relay them. And that's my dog scratching away at his post. Bless him. I graduated from college in 1991. Should I put the year on my resume? Is it acceptable on a resume to put dates for some jobs, but not for all? Helen, what's your take on this question?
No, absolutely no dates on your graduation. It's not necessary. If you get offered a job and they have to do a background check, they're going to find out that you did the the degree or you didn't. So for them to interview you, it's not necessary and not something they should be asking either. But you definitely, again, shouldn't make it so easy for them that, oh, I graduated in 1980. Oh, that makes me, so no dates for your graduation. The rest of the question regarding your experience, the ideal that's kind of put in most places is 10 to 15 years. If you have one job that's longer, then you should have a progression through that job of how you started and where you are. The other thing is, if you have experience that you want to represent older than that, you can put underneath your chronological experience, you can put additional professional experience, and you can list it. For example, I had a client who worked for IBM, so you want that on there. But you don't put dates. You put a little story of what you did and what your responsibilities were or what you achieved. Achievements are so enormous today, and specifics. They're very into specifics. So I increased the client customer base by 10% or 50% or whatever it is. I manage the budget with a return on investment of 20%. So the specifics that you can put together are important. But that would be one way to represent them. Another thing you can do, if you have experience, you put it in your skills. And then when you're interviewing, if the question comes up, well, where did you do this particular task, or how did you learn this task, or how did it come out? You can reference then where you were and how you handled that skill. Very important. I've always said, finding a job is a job. So very important that you do research, that you understand when you're interviewing the company you're interviewing with, their mission, and how you fit into that and what you bring to the table. Very important for you to have stories in your head that say, okay, yes, I understand that you want to improve your customer return or customer service numbers, and this is how I did it in my previous life, or how I currently do it, or how I did it on a team that I participated, how we rewrote the process and improved the results. So you need to have specific stories to give them for reference. But that would be as far as getting away with experience without dates. Either show it in your skills and then discuss it later, or you can put additional professional experience without dates.
So I love this. This is also such solid advice. And I love that we're getting some really great comments coming in and follow-up questions. So I'm going to pepper some in. So Catherine wrote, the problem is that no graduation date will automatically signal senior, says Catherine. And I think it's a really interesting point, because what we're talking about too then is this bias, right, that is happening in seen and unseen ways, right? So there's ways that we can do our best. Like you said, don't use the dates. But now if someone is seeing that, like, oh, they're trying to hide their age. Do you have any feelings about that?
I think that if you have a chronological employment history, I don't think, I agree with you that you can have a hiring manager or a recruiter who's going to say, same thing if you put additional professional experience with no dates, they're going to say, oh, when did you do that? 100 years ago. So yes, you're right that they can make that assumption. Do you want to work with them if they make that assumption? And I understand when you're looking for a job, you want a job, but generally speaking, no. I appreciate what you're saying about the date not being there may give an image, but I think not having graduation dates is pretty widely accepted. And I think that it's something that you make it too easy for them. Your goal when you submit your resume or your application, and in some instances on applications, you have to put graduation dates. You can put 9999 and get past that piece of the application, the online. But your goal is to get to them, to get to the interview, to be able to sell yourself, to be able to have some common ground with them, to be able to make that net relationship, so that there's a reason that they are interested in hiring you. So putting a date on your resume, again, for graduation, no, I would still suggest no. And again, if you have someone who looks at who's spending time looking at resumes and saying, oh, no date, they must be too old. I'm not sure you want to work with them anyway. So.
Right. We had another clarification question, which I think is, appreciate this. Erica asked, to be clear, we shouldn't claim more than 10 to 15 years total experience. So you were, can you elaborate on just that window of time and what, and recap on that for us?
Right. Yes. Yes. If you can do that, if you can on your resume represent 10 to 15 years without going back further, that's the ideal format to be presented. If you have to go back to 20, okay. If you're in one job, it's more, again, you would progress, so it's more difficult to not do it. But what's acceptable, what's considered acceptable is 10 to 15 years of your previous experience. This is what, even again, on background checks, what is going to be required. It's not going to say to you, what did you do 20 years ago, if it was something separate and not relevant.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, it was so many great comments and questions coming in. So let's see if we can fire these out. Heather asks, and what about gaps in the resume? I feel like this is a really common question, or a relatable question, excuse me. I noticed some HR managers point them out. How do you feel about them? And so I'm going to spill this out a little open, a little wider. So gaps in the resume. So some examples that could be, time off from work. There was, having a kid. Hello, COVID over the past 2 years, that's something we can all identify with. A lot of people are pivoting. So, and there's 1,000 other reasons why there might be a gap. Can you talk about this and how to strategically approach this with HR hiring folks?
Well, the couple of things I can say is, number one, that you always need to be honest, that if there's a gap on the resume, you need to be ready to address it, whatever it was, whether you were caregiver, parenting, downsized in COVID and unemployed, whatever it is, you need to address it. But you also need to remember during that period of time, for example, if you were parenting or if you were a caregiver, you had to use a lot of skill. You had to do a lot of things. And so what you should be prepared to talk about, or maybe you volunteered, what you should be prepared to talk about is what you did during that period. Not in specific personal detail, that's actually no one's business. But if you volunteered, if you had to manage medical billing, if you had to handle a budget, if you had to, again, if you were parenting, work on a team at school where maybe you planned events and got all the other parents together, a lot of skill there, a lot of skill. So you need to think about what you've done, what the skills you had to use during that period of time, and be ready to talk about those if the question comes up about gaps. But you have to address them and be honest about them. Yes.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to bounce a little bit between some of our pre-submitted questions and the ones that are coming in here. So on the topic of resumes, continuing that, someone wrote in, how many pages can a resume be with? And this example is 38 years of professional experience. I've been advised to leave off an experience that extends 30 years. So what's your take on that? So we talked about the 15 years there, but would you, with the things that happened before it, maybe there's something that's really important. You talked about the transferable skills. Is there any way to incorporate things that may be beyond that 15-year window?
Well, absolutely. And again, I mean, certainly going to 20 years is 38. It's going to put a great challenge on you to get past that initially, to get in their face, which is what you want to do. So you can represent what you've done during that time as the skills, in skills, in achievements, whatever you've done, you can represent there. And then again, when you're interviewing, if there's a question, well, I don't see where you increase the customer service base by 10%. Well, you can say, I did that previously when you get to the interview, but your goal is to get to the interview again and make yourself totally absolutely necessary for them. So the 10 to 15 years is ideal. I always say up to 20. After that, again, you could say additional professional experience and just put a little story about what you did without dates, not even mention a company if there's something that you feel is needed. But again, you can put it in experience and skills and then reference the specifics in an interview. As far as the length of a resume, test studies done with recruiters say that they prefer 2 pages. Unless you're a recent grad and you can do 1 page, but otherwise they prefer 2 pages. So unless you're, or at the other end of the spectrum, if you're a high-level executive, then it's going to be longer. But ideally for most of us, it's 2 pages.
And why do you think that is, that they prefer 2 over 1?
Well, I think one sometimes, another thing to add about resumes is, and I know that there are there's a lot of information online about how to format your resume. The best format for your resume is a very simple classic format. If you put columns, applicant tracking systems, which is what your resume is going to go through, can get confused. There's some newer systems that will read columns, but not all of them. So your resume is going to get kicked out. If you put graphics, again, these systems, these robotic systems that you have to get through to get in front of someone's eyes, get very confused with anything very creative, unless you're in a creative field. And even then, my suggestion would be to have a classic format of your background and something more creative that you can email to someone, which is where your networking comes in. So you use a classic format and you do the 2 pages and you avoid columns and anything that might confuse the robots. So I think that the recruiters themselves, 1 page, I think, in my experience as a recruiter, can sometimes be too intense, and people will try and fit everything on 1 page, and they'll reduce their font and they'll do things that then make it difficult to read it. So 2 pages usually works out where things are clear, easy to read, and they can get through fairly quickly.
I love that. That's so good. To not confuse the robots. And we had a question that came in the chat here about columns and formatting. So I love that we just addressed it. You just addressed that. Thank you. So I'm gonna just kind of stay in the world of resumes here for a little bit with some stuff that came in from the chat. Okay, there was the column one. Great. Someone asked here that they're transitioning into tech and they were told to not include any other former jobs that weren't tech. So for them, that meant just putting on the boot camp, but they have all this other experience. So that it would have all this nothingness. So you're shaking your head no. We've kind of like touched on this in different ways. So tell me what's the pro tip advice, Helen?
Well, because when you're pivoting or transitioning to something new, that experience that you have has to, again, this is where you sit down and evaluate, what did I learn? What did I experience? What did I achieve? They can impact what you want to do, even if it's entirely different. We talked about transferable skills, soft skills today, being able to participate in a team and do it well and be successful, or communication. All of these things are very important. And so those are represented in your previous experience. So I would say perhaps you don't need as much detail in your previous experience as someone looking to stay in whatever field you come from. But I think you need to represent your achievements, and you certainly need to reference the transferable skills that you have. So if you want to go into tech, but you want to go onto a team in a large tech company, I'm not a tech, never been a tech recruiter, so here I'm really blind. But you want to go onto a team. Well, did you work on a team? Were you successful on a team? Did your team achieve something wonderful? That's important, because you have to show that not only can you handle the technical side, but that you can participate as a good employee and a contributing employee, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, so we got lots of great questions coming in still. So let's talk about a bit. There's a bunch of questions related to the resumes on the other side of it, which is the hiring managers and the recruiters. Let's talk about them for a little bit. I love this question that Tammy Moore asked. Are most recruiters young? I've heard more than one place that old people cost more.
Um, I think it's, I have a lot of friends who are recruiters from my life, and they're not all young. And so I think it depends on, I agree with you, the world is being very much taken over and run by young people, which is not a bad thing. But I think that you need to, when a recruiter is interviewing you for a job, what they're looking for is you to make their life easier, for you to be the person that can come in, no big learning curve, make a contribution and be successful, because that's important for them in their career. So what you need to go armed with is, number one, how you're going to do that. How, again, this is where it takes so much time, because you need to research that company. What is their mission? What's going on with them that maybe you saw on the news? Do they have a project that they're trying to launch that your background is perfect for? Then you need to be able to talk about that and relate how you can help them get done what they want done. Or maybe there's something in the news about some challenges they have. For example, again, lately there's a lot of the news about Netflix. If you were in that industry and you could make something better for them, then that's what you need to go to the table and talk about. This is how I can address. So you need to do your research, and you need to know who you're going to talk to and what's going on with the company and how you can help them get past that or improve it or correct it or develop it if it's new.
And holy moly, we only have 3 minutes left, which is bonkers to me. We've gone through like half of our questions. This is a huge topic. So in these last few minutes, which is, I'm dumbfounded, honestly. I was like, what? How did that happen? Helen, could you, we have so many other great topics that, in some of the questions that you got to see about, identifying ageism, things in the current workplace. If you feel like you're a victim, is there anything you'd like to touch on in these last couple of minutes that if people walk away with one thing from this talk, what is it that you can help them?
Well, the only thing I can say about experiencing ageism, as having done it firsthand, is that it's very subtle. Unfortunately, the age discrimination law puts the burden on you to prove it. And there you'll see cases in the paper where people have won large settlements and so on and so forth. But I, again, know from personal experience that you won't find a lawyer who doesn't want you to pay for his advice. And you need to have very specific, detailed documentation. It's very difficult to prove, unfortunately. But if you're experiencing ageism in the workplace, so for example, something that I made notes of, if it's microaggression, then you can nicely say, if someone's saying something that's demeaning, you can say, just turn to them and say, I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. What did you say? And when you make them own it, they're not so quick to say it. So in that environment, you can do that. As far as internally, if you're being overlooked for promotions or training or projects, you can address your hiring manager and document the response. And then you can go to HR. And after HR, you can go to the Equal Employment Opportunity and file a complaint. And then you can also do the lawyer. But again, you need to have specific documentation. And yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Unless you happen to find someone who says, no, we want someone younger, then you're good. And just make a note what their name was, what the date was, and exactly what they said.
Yeah. Well, Helen, thank you for that. Someone also asked earlier, do you have any resources? Someone asked if you had like interview questions, and answers as a prep tool, or any other tools that you can offer that people could go to, perhaps on your website or out there on the internet for these kinds of questions and continue this.
On my website, you can go and put your email address in and get a career planning workbook, which talks a bit about networking and formatting your resume and those types of things. Also, there's an opportunity for a free consultation, which if there's a question we haven't answered and you go and book a free consultation, I will be more than happy to answer your question and converse with you. So, yeah.
Great. And can you tell everybody what your website is for us?
Yes, I can actually put it in here.
Thank you. You can put it in. And if there are questions we didn't answer, I can tell you there are many, many questions we didn't answer. So I expect you will get lots of emails and requests because I am burning with several more myself. So thank you so much for making the time, Helen. And folks, thank you for being here. I'm going to give you all a digital round of applause. You're wonderful. Keep at it. Email Helen. Continue to go to the Power to Fly website for the resources. And I agree. Everyone in the chat said we got to have Helen back. I agree, and we will. Helen, we're gonna be seeing you soon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all very much for attending. And yes, I enjoy these conversations. So anytime.
All right. Great. Take care, everyone. Have a
You
good
and
day.
Francis have a good day.
Oh yeah. Thank